I guess I should start by saying that our marriage wasn't perfect. I mean, whose is? 12 years together, 2 kids, and all the weight of real life piling up. It's not exactly a fairy tale, but I thought we were solid. Sure, there were cracks, little fractures you can feel when you run your hands over something that's been through years of wear and tear. We had our arguments, our distance sometimes, but I thought that was just life. Normal. The spa trip was supposed to be her reset. I even suggested it. We've been going through this weird phase for the last year or so. She seemed distant, always tired, always distracted. She said it was work stress, being a mom, all of it pulling her in too many directions at once. And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? I know how hard she works, how much she does for the kids, for me. I thought a weekend away would help her decompress, take some of the weight off. She was so excited when I booked it. A 3-day retreat at some high-end resort about 2 hours out of town. Massages, facials, yoga classes, the works. It'll be good for me, she said, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. I remember standing in the kitchen as she hugged me, thanking me over and over for thinking of her, for doing something so thoughtful. And I remember feeling proud of myself, like I was finally doing something right for her. She left on Friday afternoon, the kids and I waving her off from the driveway. It was one of those picture-perfect moments, you know? She blew us kisses, her bags in the back seat, her hair up in that casual way she does when she doesn't even realize how beautiful she looks. I watched her drive off and thought, this is what love is. The first day passed like any other. I took the kids to their soccer game. We had pizza for dinner, watched a movie, and FaceTimed her before bed. She was glowing on the screen, wrapped up in one of those plush white robes, her hair wet from the spa's pool. She told me she felt amazing already, like her whole body was unwinding. I smiled, told her to enjoy it. She deserved it. It wasn't until Sunday that something fell off. She was supposed to come home by noon. At 1 p.m., I texted her. No response. By 2 p.m., I was calling. Still nothing. My mind didn't jump to anything dark or dramatic at first. Maybe she lost track of time, or her phone died. But as the hours ticked by, this gnawing feeling in my gut started to grow. I couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. She finally walked through the door, just after 5 p.m., almost 5 hours later than she was supposed to. I'll never forget how she looked. Her hair was messy, like she'd thrown it into a bun without a mirror. She had this flushed, almost nervous energy about her. And when I asked her what happened, why she hadn't answered my texts or calls, she gave me this vague, hurried excuse about a long yoga class and losing track of time. It didn't sit right. Something in her voice, the way she avoided my eyes when she spoke, I don't know. Maybe I'm one of those people who can sense when their whole world is about to tilt on its axis. Because that's what it felt like. Like the ground beneath my feet wasn't as steady as I thought it was. But I didn't push her. Not then. She was tired, she said. She just wanted to shower, kiss the kids goodnight, and crash in a bed. So I let it go. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, something had shifted. I could feel it, even if I couldn't name it yet. That night, as she slept next to me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd ever truly know what happened at that spa. If that Sunday evening felt strange, the days that followed only made it worse. Looking back, I can see how the signs were all there. They weren't loud. Not at first. It was more like this feint of something being wrong, something I couldn't touch, but couldn't ignore either. For one, she was different, and not in a bad way, necessarily. It was almost the opposite. She was lighter, happier, like something inside her had come alive over that weekend. She smiled more, laughed at the kids' dumb jokes, and even threw her arms around me when I walked in the door from work a couple of times. It was such a shift that I should have been grateful. Anyone else would have seen that and thought, wow, this is great. She's coming back to herself. But it didn't feel right. I'd be lying if I said I didn't second-guess myself. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there weren't any. But then there were other things. Subtle changes, little habits that shifted just enough to make me notice. Like how she started keeping her phone close, even taking it to the bathroom with her. Or how she'd smile at texts, then lock the screen before I could glance at it. She said it was work stuff, stressful clients, new projects, the usual excuses. And I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the way her eyes darted away from mine when I asked her about it, or how her tone would shift just enough to make me wonder if she was hiding something, it planted this seed of doubt in me that I couldn't shake. The tipping point came about a week later. I noticed she was spending more time on her laptop in the evenings, saying she was catching up on emails or planning the kids' schedules. One night, while she was in the shower, I opened it. I don't know what I was looking for. Honestly, maybe I was just being paranoid, or maybe I needed to prove to myself that I was wrong, that nothing was happening. I didn't find anything on her laptop. Not at first, but then something caught my eye. She'd left her Gmail logged in, and there it was, a single email thread with no subject line, buried under the more mundane stuff. The name attached to it was unfamiliar, Elliot P. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before I clicked. The emails weren't long, just a few exchanges over the course of a week, but they were enough to shatter something inside me. Thank you for this weekend. I haven't felt that alive in years. Neither have I. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through the brief thread. It wasn't graphic, but it didn't need to be. I could read between the lines. The words might as well have been a confession, every syllable dripping with the weight of what they meant. Elliot, the yoga instructor. I knew it even before I reached the part where she mentioned his name. She told me about him that weekend during our FaceTime call. There's this great instructor here, she'd said, her face glowing on the screen. He's so good at what he does, so calming, so centered. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was just one of those throwaway comments, a fleeting detail about her trip. But now I could see it for what it was, the start of something I hadn't seen coming. She came out of the shower a few minutes later, her hair wrapped in a towel, her face free of makeup and glowing from the steam. She smiled at me, that same radiant smile that had first drawn me to her years ago. And all I could think was, how could you? How could you look at me like that and carry this secret inside you? But I didn't confront her. Not then. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared of what I'd hear. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to face the truth, to admit that my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, shared a home and children with, had let someone else into the space that was supposed to be ours alone. Instead, I closed her laptop, set it back where she'd left it, and crawled in a bed next to her like nothing had happened. She kissed me goodnight, her lips soft and warm against mine, and I felt like I was living in someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I called in sick to work. I dropped the kids off at school, drove to a park nearby, and just sat in the car staring at the dashboard. My mind was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. Why did she do it? Was it me? Was I not enough for her anymore? Had I done something to push her away? And then the more painful questions. Was this the first time? Or had there been others before Elliot? By the time I picked the kids up that afternoon, I'd made up my mind. I had to talk to her. I had to know the truth. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat her down at the kitchen table and told her I needed to ask her something. She looked at me, confused at first, and then, as I said his name out loud, I watched her face change. I thought I'd rehearsed it in my head. Driving home that day, I played out the conversation 100 different ways. In some versions, I was calm and composed, asking her the truth with quiet strength. In others, I was angry, demanding answers, shouting accusations. But when it came time to actually face her, to sit her down and say the words, my voice came out small and uneven. Who's Elliot? She froze completely. Her hand, mid-motion as she was reaching for a glass of water, just stopped. For a second, I thought maybe she didn't know who I was talking about, that maybe I'd overreacted and blown this whole thing out of proportion. But then her eyes flickered just for a moment, and I knew. She put the glass down slowly, deliberately, like she was buying herself time. Why are you asking about Elliot? She said, her tone too casual. My stomach clenched. Because I saw the emails, I said, my voice trembling. I know there's something going on. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. And then she did the one thing I hadn't prepared for. She started crying. Not just tears, but full-on sobs, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her like I always had whenever she was upset. But another part of me, the part that was burning with anger, confusion, and betrayal, wanted to pull away. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, finally, her voice muffled. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. So it did happen. I asked, my voice cracking. You were with him? She nodded, still crying, and I swear to God, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My whole body went cold, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the table. How could you do this? I asked, my voice rising. How could you throw everything away like this? For what? For some guy you just met? It wasn't like that, she said, looking up at me, her face streaked with tears. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. I don't even know how to explain it. Try, I said sharply, anger finally bubbling to the surface. Try to explain it, because I need to understand how the woman I've loved for 12 years, the mother of my kids, could just betray me like this. She took a shaky breath, wiping her face with her hands. I was unhappy, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Not with you, not with us, but with myself. I felt invisible, like I'd lost who I was. And when I met him, it was like he saw me, like he brought something out of me that I hadn't felt in years. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. And what about me? I asked. What about everything I've done to support you, to love you, to be there for you? Did that mean nothing to you? It's not like that, she said, shaking her head. I love you. I've always loved you. This wasn't about you. It was about me. Her words felt like a slap in the face. So what? I said bitterly. I'm supposed to just accept that you needed to find yourself, so you slept with some yoga instructor? That's supposed to make it okay. I didn't sleep with him, she said quickly, her voice desperate. It wasn't like that. We kissed and it got close, but I stopped it before it went too far. I couldn't do that to you, to us. For a second, I didn't know if I believed her. Maybe I didn't want to believe her. But something about the way she said it, the rawness in her voice, made me think it might be true, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Do you have feelings for him? I asked, my voice quieter now. She hesitated, and that hesitation was like another knife in my chest. I don't know, she said finally. I don't think so. I think it was more about what he represented than him as a person. He made me feel alive again, but I know it's not real. I know it doesn't compare to what we have. I don't know how I let it get this far. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to process everything she'd just told me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but I also felt completely numb, like my body didn't know how to handle this level of betrayal. Do the kids know? I asked suddenly, the thought hitting me like a freight train. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. Of course not. They don't know anything. I would never let them get caught up in this. I nodded, but her answer didn't bring me any comfort. All I could think about was how our family, the life we built together, was now hanging by a thread. I need time, I said finally, standing up from the table. I can't deal with this right now. She started to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. Just don't, I said, my voice breaking. I need space. And then I walked out. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get away from her, from the house, from everything that reminded me of what we've been and what we've lost. I ended up sitting in my car in a parking lot a few miles away, staring at the steering wheel as tears streamed down my face. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't even know if I wanted to. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life, about her, about us, had changed in the blink of an eye. It's been 2 months since the night she told me the truth. 2 months of living in this strange, liminal space where everything feels uncertain. I don't know how to describe what it's like to coexist with someone who's broken your heart, while also being the person you're supposed to trust the most. Some days it feels like I'm walking on broken glass, each step hurting more than the last. Other days, it feels like I'm just hollow, empty, like there's nothing left inside me to feel. After that initial confrontation, I moved into the guest room. It wasn't a dramatic thing. No slamming doors or ultimatums. I just needed space. We told the kids it was because I was snoring again, a lame excuse that they seemed to accept without question. Maybe they've noticed something is off, but if they have, they haven't said anything. We've been to therapy. That was her idea. And to her credit, she's been the one driving the effort to repair things. She's apologized 100 times, maybe more. She's cried in sessions, pouring her heart out about how much she hates herself for what she did, how she wishes she could take it all back. And I believe her. I really do. But believing her doesn't make it easier to forgive her. Our therapist says healing takes time, that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. She talks about active forgiveness and emotional reconnection, but I feel stuck in this weird place where I can't move forward and I can't go back. I've asked her every question I could think of about Elliot. Some of them were logical, like why him? Or, what did he give you that I couldn't? Others were darker. Would you have gone all the way if he'd pushed for it? Did you even think about me and the kids when you let this happen? She's answered them all as honestly as she could, or at least as honestly as I think she could. She swears it wasn't physical beyond the kiss and the moments leading up to it. She insists she ended it as soon as she realized how far she'd let it go. And the rational part of me believes her. But there's this other part of me, the part that's hurt and bitter and angry, that keeps whispering, what if she's lying? Elliot's gone at least. She showed me the email she sent him after we talked, telling him that what happened was a mistake and that she couldn't have any more contact with him. He didn't reply, apparently, and she hasn't heard from him since. But the fact that she even had to send that email, God, it eats at me. I can't stop picturing them together. I keep replaying this imaginary version of their almost moment in my head, filling in the gaps with the worst possible scenarios. Her touching his face, him pulling her closer, the way her lips must have felt against his, the same lips I've kissed 1,000 times. It's a loop I can't escape from, no matter how hard I try. And then there's this other part of me, this sick, twisted part, that keeps wondering if I was the problem, if I push her away somehow, if I stop being the man she needed me to be. I mean, she said it wasn't about me, but how can I believe that? How can I not blame myself when the woman I've loved for over a decade felt the need to look outside our marriage for something I couldn't give her? I don't even know what fixing this looks like anymore. Our therapist says we need to rebuild intimacy. But how do you rebuild something that feels like it's been burned to the ground? We've tried. We got on a couple of date nights, had a few deep conversations that felt like progress in the moment. But then I'll see her across the table, laughing at a joke I made, and all I can think is, she gave part of herself to someone else. She shared something with him that should have been mine. It's not just about the kiss. It's about what it represents. The crack in our foundation. The fact that she was willing to let someone else into a space that was supposed to be sacred. Some nights I think about leaving. I think about packing a bag, walking out the door, and starting over. I imagine what it would be like to have a fresh start, to not wake up every morning with this weight on my chest. But then I think about the kids, their faces, their laughter, their little rituals that make our family feel like home. I think about what it would do to them if I left, how it would shatter their world in ways they might never fully recover from. And then I think about her, because even now, even after everything, I still love her. I hate her for what she did, but I love her too. And I don't know how to reconcile those two feelings. I guess that's what it comes down to. I don't know what to do. Do I stay and try to rebuild something that might never be the same? Or do I walk away and try to find some version of happiness on my own? Every day feels like a crossroads, and I have no idea which path to take. All I know is that I'm not the same man I was before that weekend, and we're not the same couple. Maybe we never will be again. But for now, I'm still here. I don't know if that's strength or weakness. Maybe it's both.